Welcome to the Writing Centrifuge. Today there will be spoilers for Chainsawman Manga Part 1, which is chapters 1 through 97, Chainsawman the anime adaptation as of today, January 5th, and those are all the spoilers. I finally get to talk about my favorite character, Denji. The reason Denji is my favorite is that, there are a lot, but the most prominent one is his relationships with other characters. Denji and Beam, Denji and Aki, Denji and Power, and Denji and Pochita are all major parts of why I loved Part 1 so much. Heck, I even made my first YouTube video on Denji and Power. And he ended up being an important part of both other videos. I can't get enough of the guy. And not just because he's a main character of an amazing series, but because he's a main contributor to what makes it so great. The interaction he has with every character from Makima to Rize to Kobani all show off his unique nature and show a lot of aspects of other characters that are amazing. First, I'll touch on his backstory. Then I'll focus on some of my favorite examples of his relationships. Then I'll talk about what makes Denji Denji, and lastly, why I love the ending to Part 1. Sections: Inherited Debt, Pochita, Himeno, Beam, Rize, Kishibe, Denji, and the end. I don't know much about Denji's life before the series starts, but from subtle things that you can pick up throughout the story, you can paint a pretty bleak picture. The first tidbit is one he gives Rize when he tells her that he's never been to school, not even in elementary. Denji wasn't even that young when his dad died. He was definitely above starting school age. The door that we see throughout all of his dreams shows that he used to live in an alley. That alley has rats and garbage, so I'm guessing they weren't rich or that it was a safe place for a kid to grow up. And it doesn't guarantee that it was stable either. Other things we know about Denji are about his parents. Denji's mother likely died when he was very young, because he had told Pochita that she died of a heart condition and that she started coughing up blood, which he lets Pochita know in the first chapter. I wonder if maybe she could have been saved if not for their financial situation, or if it was fatal either way. Because she could have been saved, that might speak to societal commentary. Poor or otherwise underprivileged people are forced to die even though they don't have to, because the system is unfair to them. Another thing that I want to mention, which is likely an incredibly important context, is the debt that Denji's father had to the Yakuza. This likely means that he was into some sort of crime, and if I were to make a guess based on the amount, it might have been some sort of illegal gambling. That makes me think that the debt could have even been a major contributing factor to their situation. Making a fun, educated guess, Denji's parents might not have even started out poor, but instead Denji's father either lied or hid the debt from Denji's mother. Then, when she got pregnant, it was too late to back out if she wanted her son to know his father. After she passed, the rest followed. That's probably the best version of what could have happened to Denji's parents, and is also likely to be disproven as the story continues, but what I know, and what I think, it's just headcanon stuff. Thinking that maybe Denji could have lived a normal life if not for the death of his mother and flaws of his father is still really tragic though, and either way I would have no idea what happened to his grandparents, aunts, uncles, or cousins, but it's still fun to think about. The next part I want to talk about is specifically Denji's father. It's revealed near the end of Part 1 that Denji killed his father and repressed the memory, which is why he had that reoccurring dream and why he didn't open the door. His father abused him, and one night he got drunk and nearly beat Denji to death. So, for the sake of survival, Denji killed his father and repressed the memory so that he could move forward with his life. I think what Makima says about this adds a layer to the situation. She tells Denji that he repressed that memory so that he could keep dreaming of a better life for himself, and so that he wouldn't feel as if he didn't deserve it because he killed his father. This is obviously not a true line of thinking, but I think that it is what Denji believed, since she had been looking into his mind. It's really interesting to me that that's the case, because Denji living out his dreams is the purpose of Pochita's sacrifice. And if Denji didn't dream, he wouldn't really be Denji. What happens after he's forced to kill his father is so incredibly tragic. He's forced to take on his father's debt to the Yakuza, and they are not kind about it at all. He's forced to risk his life to kill literal monsters for years. He still doesn't get to go to school, and he always knows that if he doesn't make enough, he dies. In the beginning, and likely for a few years, he didn't make enough money for food, and he was forced to eat out of dumpsters. He also looked unkempt, and likely smelled bad too. A lot of what Denji says in both chapter and episode 1 are tragic and sad. He states that he had to sell body parts, including his eye and one of his testicles. He is also shown grappling with his potential death, which we see as Pochita revives him, and is shown that he gave permission to Pochita to become a fiend using his body. He also states when he's too hungry to sleep, he starts thinking about his debts, which doesn't help him sleep even more. What the heck? That's really sad. He's only 16 years old, but he's gone through so much pain. And that's all before he dies and is then taken in by the world's top manipulator. Relationship with Pochita is what hooked me into watching, and then reading The Amazing Story of Chainsawman. That first episode where we got to see their bond forged through a tragic life was incredibly tough, and makes me cry every time I watched it. Denji had no one, and at first he didn't even fully trust Pochita, as shown when he forces Pochita into a contract instead of just helping the little guy. Not because he was wrong to do so, but because it showed that at first Denji was all about survival. And then after they defeat a poor, helpless jellyfish, they go on to have a career as Ghostbusters. Yep, busting all the ghosts alright. After that, they would probably go home, cut down trees, and then cuddle. And another reason why Denji's relationship with Pochita is so special is because it informs how he bonds with others going forward, or at least with power. He wasn't able to relate to her struggle until he put it through his Pochita frame of reference. And that speaks to the fact that Denji had no other real connections outside of that. If Denji was more shy or cautious, he would have probably been a very anxious person in the world, bundled up into one really awkward guy if he wasn't so self-confident. That does show a lot, like how he doesn't see how at times he can be completely socially unaware, rude, crude, and inappropriate, as well as not seeing clear signs about the dangers around him. Like how he was excited to find out that Himeno kissed all the newbies, because it meant that he was for sure going to get it. And not realizing or even considering that she was exploiting him and that it wasn't actually the enviable position he thought it was. If you want an example of him saying something inappropriate, how about the time he told Power he wanted to touch her, over and over and over again? This kid has no idea what anything social was, and Pochita was truly the only connection he had up to that point. Best wishes, buddy. Love ya. I kind of mentioned her already, but she does play a role as Denji's official first friend. Although she definitely is worse the older you get, you can't deny that Denji's considered her a friend. They had an alliance and everything. The first time they meet, she offers him a kiss for doing a good job, and when he does, she, baby birds him. She was drunk and it wasn't on purpose, but that's totally what happened. He kind of forgets about it after their alliance, but I'd wager he still thinks about it from time to time. When he's trying to go to sleep and everything. Denji choosing to become close to her and reflect on how he wasn't going to cry for her shows how much he cared. He was concerned that not crying for her meant that his inhuman heart meant he also lost his human emotions, which thankfully wasn't true. Himeno also opened the floodgates for Denji. From that point forward, he had his first friend, and he knew what it felt like. When he told Aki that he would make friends with a fiend because he didn't have any, it showed what kind of friendless life Denji was leading until his relationship with Himeno. Which is ironic because Aki would become one of his best friends Denji ever had, but after Himeno opened those gates, what would come next is nothing short of epic. Heck yeah, baby. Now I get to talk about Beam. Beam is the shark fiend, and while Power was being sucked dry like a Capri Sun, he was partnered with Denji. Makima tells Denji it was Beam's request and that Beam only wanted to work with Denji. There are some strange undertone in their scenes once you find out the true nature of Makima and of Chainsawman, but they are still super fun, and Beam's confidence in Denji makes way more sense. Beam is amazing, so I hate to say their friendship isn't incredibly rich in themes, but what it lacks in themes, it more makes up for in an awesome bro moments. And an encapsulation of a friendship that Denji had that didn't need to be that deep. To me, Beam is a representative of a fun friend for Denji, and a great example of him trying to get close to others. At first, Beam is a nuisance to the newly competent Denji, and Denji just has to deal with him. But as time goes on, he gets better at dealing with him and even appreciates the progress he made with him, as he explains before the fire and waterworks begin later. Through the battle that follows the WTF moment, we get to see a different side to their relationship altogether. The faith, the trust, and the fun times with these two. We see them face danger and defy the odds with one another, but unfortunately that is the end. After what ends up happening, it hits the fan, and Denji and Beam don't get a moment to reconnect with what ends up happening. We get to see, and definitely not before our boy Beam dies and becomes Makima's puppet. R.I.P. Beam. He truly showed what it's like to have a ride-or-die friend randomly show up in your life. Gone too soon, but before he was gone, he showed us a side of Denji that could connect to someone on a base level. They were truly in-the-moment bros, and I absolutely had to mention him. Oh, Rize, what happens to you is so sad. And the reason I want to talk about her is for the things I mentioned about her already in other videos. She tried to get Denji to see that life under Makima's thumb wasn't as good as he thought it was. She also manipulated our boy, but ended up falling just as hard, if not harder. Rize met Denji in the rain, and he romantically pulled out a flower and gave it to her. After the rain subsided, she invited Denji to the cafe where she worked in order to pay him back. He beat her there, and they end up bonding. After he continues to return after work for a while. They grow closer, and as Rize states later, she kept seeing him after that first encounter. Why? I think it was so that she could play as a normal girl, and talk to a boy she liked by extending her purpose as long as possible. As for the question of what was real and what wasn't, I think it was a mix of both, through and through. She lied about the stories, the situation, and her personality, but the feelings were real. All of them. And if she had a choice, I think she would have chosen to stay that way forever, but it couldn't be. She is forced to rip out his tongue and try to kill him. I think that must have given her some real whiplash. She tried to convince Denji to go with her, but he didn't have it in him, and she was forced to take action, because time was up. The bomb was set to go off, and off it went. She died, never being able to tell Denji the truth about her feelings, and Denji never found out how close she actually came to getting back. Although, he might have pieced it together after Makima used Rize's body against him. I hope he did. Why am I talking so much about Rize in Denji's video? Because Rize shows a lot about Denji, and how he brings out the true nature of the people around him by being an honest person. And with how he brings no ulterior motives. Because of him and his inability to not go for what he wants, Rize got to feel like a normal girl for the first time. She wanted to continue to make new memories with him, but tragedy struck, and that would never come to be. A little kid shouldn't have to be made into a weapon, but she was. She should have been able to go to school, but she couldn't. In a way, she's very similar to Denji, and I think hearing about his life is a part of what changed her. Denji never backed away or backed down. He did his best to live his life that he wanted to live. And even though Makima took advantage of that, his pure nature is what drew Rize to him in the first place. Although she wouldn't be mentioned much, if at all, for the rest of Part 1, not even by Denji, the tragedy of her story lives on. Unexpected turn for a character. I never expected him to be what he was, and his definition for a perfect hunter ended up becoming an amazing throughline for Denji. Kishibe meets Denji much in the same way that he meets other people. Makima has him train him in power. After the Katana Man attack, Denji and Power needed to be better fighters. And there is no better teacher than Kishibe. He trained Himeno and countless others. Even in his old age, he still made Denji and Power more formidable. And they were already super strong. What Kishibe does for Denji in a lot of ways is just make him stronger, rescue him, give him a compliment, and then be there for him in the aftermath, but wow, does he use his time effectively. Most of what he does, where we can see it, highlights his own views on becoming a hunter, and his relationship with Himeno highlights that. They both operate under the belief that what made a great hunter was being a little crazy, and I think that they meant it in more ways than one, especially Kishibe. It means that a person can't be messed with, frightened, or predicted, which is great for killing those literal embodiments of fear, but it also means that a person can deal with a lot of grief and having countless comrades die without it affecting them too much. Lastly, and the part I think that Kishibe kept to himself, was a person who could do their job without hatred and without compromising who they were. And Denji not only lives up to these standards, but embodies and defines them. We'll get to that more in the next session, which, is about Denji again, but the reason I mentioned it here is because of how soundly and concisely Kishibe spells this out. He created and is the ultimate judge for this standard, and Denji turned out to be his greatest student, who further refined it while Kishibe watched. Kishibe is the first real mentor Denji ever gets. Aki started off as a jerk who wants to save his life by shipping him off, and when they do connect some more, they're more like brothers. Power is his equal and his best friend. Pochita is the best good boy in the world, and Makima sucks, so Kishibe it is. I think that it's interesting that this is the first time we see of Denji actually having a teacher. And much like you would expect for Denji, he isn't the typical classroom affair. Kishibe teaches Denji how to fight smart and the hard way. He continues to teach him once a week for a while, which likely stopped off screen for some time. Their relationship doesn't seem all that impactful until Kishibe saves his life, gives him a place to stay, and offers to protect him for the foreseeable future. That's true care, and I didn't expect that from Kishibe. I thought that he was hard all the way to his center, but he wasn't. He's like a man shaped by his life choices, and it's likely the way he is because he feels it's the best way to protect people. In a conversation he has with Makima, he says he's cool with her lying and doing whatever as long as he's on the human side. She is. Which she wasn't, and that's why he organized the attack against her. And then she used that to her advantage, but, it's the thought that counts. I think another thing that might be the case, and it's for my interpretation of the story, is that even though Denji fits the mold for a hunter perfectly, and he even tells Denji as much, that Kishibe doesn't fit that same mold. He cares a lot about his comrades and isn't able to let things go like Denji. And he can't hurt Makima, unlike Denji, because Denji can hurt someone without meaning harm. Although I think he needs to give himself some credit because both Denji and Kishibe managed to keep their hearts in the end. What makes Denji himself? That is a very interesting question, and the one that the video is largely based around. Denji is a straightforward, honest, confident, determined, and forgiving person. Although you'll laugh when I say he's honest, he lies all the time. He isn't honest in the traditional sense, sure, but he is in his own special way. If Denji were any different, then he wouldn't be Denji. I mentioned his confidence earlier, and it is truly remarkable. Denji, more than any other character I've seen, is confident, but not in an arrogant way. He's confident in the real way, the one that counts. Denji had every reason to hate himself, to see himself as worthless scum because of the way he grew up, but he doesn't once beat himself up or blame himself for that upbringing. While he's still in the debt, he acknowledges sad truths, like how girls wouldn't want to date him because he smells, and that he would have no money to take a girl out on a date anyway. Notice how those aren't statements that degrade him, they're true. He did smell, and the reason why girls didn't like him. He couldn't afford a date, and he acknowledged the possibility. Denji isn't a realist or anything, but he isn't afraid to look the truth in the face, and he doesn't put the blame on himself. That's a truly unique and not typical at all. Most people feel bad about themselves because of things they can't change, but Denji's perspective is completely different. He admits to himself that girls don't want to go out on dates with him, but it's not because anything is wrong with him, or even the girls for that matter, but it's because he smells, which he can't help because he has one outfit, no way to wash it, and covers himself with blood and sweat all the time. It's the truth. Girls don't want a guy that smells bad, and he can't change himself to smell good. He doesn't have the time or money to try since he's in massive debt to dangerous people. The other indicator is that when he starts taking baths, washing his clothes, and girls do like him, then he's able to accept that too. He looks at the real situation and doesn't place false blame. That's how Denji is both confident and honest. He's truly himself, and he doesn't carry the weight of things he's not responsible for. He also self-reflects often, which is a sign of a good person who's doing their best. He ponders on the tediousness of having goals, whether or not he has a human heart, and whether or not he could have done anything to save Aki. He reflects on his actions and the profound things that come with being human. He's also straightforward and determined, which can be seen through how the earnestness in which he does what he can to accomplish his goals. Even something like going on vacation with Makima, to him, is worth fighting and risking his life for. He risks his life all the time to accomplish his goals and later to protect people. The last important part of that is that, this is what I want to discuss before I wrap this all up and go to bed, is that he's forgiving. Denji didn't even hate Makima, and that speaks volumes about what he's willing to forgive. Maybe that's not the best thing, but it's Denji nonetheless. He forgave Rize after she tried to blow him up several times and attempted to manipulate him because he still liked her. He forgave Power because he related to her lonely nights with Miaoi, and he forgave Makima just because. Even with minor characters like Kobani and Himeno, he forgives them, or at least he's still cool with them, despite them doing horrible things to him. Like how he stayed and ate breakfast with Himeno the next morning because he, free food. Like, dude, I love you, man, but no. He can even love them. He can even love the reincarnated version of the woman that made him make friends so that she could kill them. So that she could use his literal heart to transform the world. Denji is built differently, and that's what I love about him. The ending to part 1 of Chainsawman is truly something special, and I would have walked away from this story the same, or if it would have been even a little bit different. Denji eats Makima, preventing her from coming back in the same form. And we see that Denji has adopted quite a few pets. All the good boys that were Makima's, and in another touching moment, Miaoi. Then, since I guess 8 pets wasn't enough, he adopted a child. The control fiend? Okay, and I'm not too sure, but when Pochita explains his dream that Denji helped him fulfill, he gives Denji some good advice. And now the next Makima will have love and connections, that finally having the dream be fulfilled is truly the way to defeat Makima. And luckily for Makima too, and finally for Denji, they get to go to school.